Good morning. Thank you for joining me in this morning mindfulness practice. We think that so much of our time is spent thinking, but there's a difference between thinking with a mind of consciousness and what's everybody else doing and how am I going to solve this problem, and thinking from the place of the solution already here. You're already calm. You're already at peace. You're already living the life that you only imagined a few years ago. We are constantly creating our life with infinite intelligence, with the Creator. You are a creative being. You have been gifted with the ability to think. You also have higher mental faculties. Are you using your higher mental faculties? Do you even know what they are? You have the ability to reason, to think about a situation and to decide, is that what you want? Or is there something more, something else, something different? Because what we continually focus on, think about, talk about, we continually bring into our experience. If you want something to change, you have to flip a switch. You have to change how you're thinking. Use your another mental faculty, perception, to change the way you're looking at things, to change your point of view. Bob Proctor wrote a book called The ABCs of Success, and I'm going to read a few of the chapters in his book. I love Bob Proctor. He was my coach and mentor, and I study his material and I teach his material every single day. When you live the material, it makes a difference in your life. He talks about getting quiet, getting still, and just allowing your mind to go to places that you love, blocking out the outside world, not looking at what you don't want and trying to figure out how to change it, but sitting quietly, no distractions. Turn off the news. Stop listening to outside opinions of why things cannot be done. And just spend some time in quiet solitude, imagining what it is that you would really love. What do you want? What do you really, really, really want? Finding out that most people can't even decide, they can't say what they really want because they don't allow themselves the opportunity to sit quietly, give thanks and praise for what they already have, and what else would I like? What would I prefer? What do I want to be different in my life? So the first chapter I want to read to you is called Thinking. And Bob Proctor said, many years ago, I was attending a seminar that a good friend of mine, Leland Valvandewal, was conducting. He said something that broke me up. In fact, the entire audience roared with laughter. He said, if most people said what they were thinking, they would be speechless. A very wise man. He was correct as well. Bob goes on to say, a number of years ago, I had the pleasure of sharing the platform at a convention with the late Dr. Kenneth McFarland, a great educator from Kentucky. He said something similar. Dr. McFarland said, 2% of the people think, 3% think they think, 95% would rather die than think. I recently read where George Bernard Shaw said most people think 2 or 3 times a year. I've gained an international reputation for myself thinking just 2 or 3 times a week. You're probably saying to yourself by now, come on, Bob, everyone thinks. Is that right? Well, let me suggest that you listen closely to most of the conversations going on around you over the next few hours. It will be obvious that most of those talking are not thinking, or they would never say what they are saying. Watch the behavior of some of your peers. You will realize they are not thinking, or they would never do what they're doing. You could fall into the 3% group, which Dr. McFarland referred to as those who think they think. With a little effort, you could catapult yourself into the 2% group that does think. They are the achievers, the winners in life. Thinking must be learned, and it is a subject that is not taught in most schools. Think about it. Rarely do we find, Martin Luther King Jr. said, rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There's an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. A great many people think they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices. And George S. Patton said, if everyone is thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking. If you're spending time in conversations and thought processes and brainstorming sessions and just listening to the conversations around you or participating in conversations, just pause for a moment and consider what's being said. If what we focus on, what we think about, what we talk about, what we send out into the universe is what we draw back to ourselves, and what you're saying, what you're talking about, what you're in conversation with, is that what you want to create more of? Or do you want to be more calm, grateful, easy flowing, richly blessed in relationships, abundantly blessed in financial wealth? Whatever it is that you want to talk about it. You want to imagine it in your mind as already done. You wouldn't be talking about the lack of it. You'd probably be taking it for granted, but that's where gratitude really comes in, is being grateful for what you have and eagerly expecting more, better, happier, more purpose. Life is really an adventure, and when we understand that there is a law of polarity and we can know what we don't want, then it's important to stop creating a bigger and bigger and bigger problem by talking about it, thinking about it, worrying about it, and just flipping a switch and going in the opposite direction, turning around and reminding yourself to focus on, what do I want? So Bob talks about the preamble to everything. He says, you have an intuitive reasoning factor. What a magnificent tool. This one gives you true freedom. So intuition is one of your 6 higher faculties. You've got perception, reason, will, memory, imagination, and intuition. So your inductive reasoning factor, what a magnificent tool. This one gives you true freedom. Reason gives you the ability to choose your thoughts. Viktor Frankl, the great Viennese psychiatrist who spent years in concentration camps during the Second World War, wrote in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that regardless of the physical or intellectual abuse he received from his captors, they could not make him think something he did not choose to think. Thinking is the highest function you are capable of, and this mental faculty should be exercised at every possible opportunity. Thought is the preamble to everything in your life. All the great leaders down through history have told us we become what we think about. In fact, they have been in complete and unanimous agreement on this point, while they disagree on almost every other point. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people rarely think. They simply accept what they see or hear. The next time someone gives you a suggestion, rather than simply accepting and acting on it, think. Exercise your reasoning factor. Ask yourself if the suggestion will improve the quality of your life. And Bob gives us another great exercise for your reasoning factor. And he says, this one I'm in the habit of using myself, which will give you almost anything you want. Take a pad and paper. At the top of the pad, write down something you want, but in the past you haven't given it serious thought in how you can accomplish it. Begin to think of how you can get what you want without violating the rights of others. So take a moment to write down something that you truly desire. And he always said, write it down in the positive tense. Don't use negative language. Like, don't say, I want to get out of debt, because when you think debt, you grow your debt. And even if you say you want to get out of debt, debt is still the focus. So you actually continue to want to get out of debt. So write down what you want. The opposite of debt, if that's the issue, is wealth or abundance or an overflow of finances, ability to not have money, but what would you do with the money? What would you buy? What experiences would you enjoy? And if it's relationships, not resentment or pushing away, but what would you love? What feeling would you love to have in your marriage, in your relationships with your children and grandchildren, relationships with your coworkers, with community, whatever it is, the love, the connectedness, the peace? What do you really want? And then he says, write off why you can't get what you want. So you could write what you don't want and burn it. You could write what you do want and don't worry about the how. As simple as this exercise sounds, very few people do it. Most people think of what they don't want, and as a result, they cheat themselves out of the good that life offers. Think deep, penetrating thoughts, and your reasoning factor will become strong. There are 1,000 thoughts lying within a man that he does not know till he takes up a pen to write. Lulled in the countless chambers of the brain, our thoughts are linked by many a hidden chain. Awake but one, and lo, what myriads arise. It seems so strange when you are in quiet peace and you're thinking about what you want and you pick up a pen and paper and you start writing. It's as if an unseen hand starts guiding you. Words just flow onto the page where sometimes you don't even know where they came from. They're coming through you, but it seems like it's divinely directed. That's why sometimes people will say, well, I wanted to write a book for 20 years, and then when I sat down and I just got quiet and I put the pen on the paper, it was as if it wrote itself. It's a weird sensation that I can't really explain to you, but practice that. Try it. See what pours out of you onto the paper. If it's what you don't want, you can examine that and say, is that what I really believe? Is that helping me get to what I want? You could literally burn that piece of paper or shred it and psychologically let it go. And then focus on, what do you want? And see if that magic pen starts writing the story of your life that you do want. Napoleon Hill said, more gold has been mined from the thoughts of men than has been taken from the earth. I want to read to you the next chapter called The Silent Switch. Bob Proctor says, we are gradually awakening to the fact that we live in a universe of infinite intelligence that responds to our every thought, but only those who delve into the study of the mind really know what a mighty energy is set in motion with each mental impulse. Thought not only molds our character, but is responsible for the changes in communities, the building of cities, the shaping of nations, and all of the great events that take place in the world. Thought is the silent switch that sets in motion man's destiny. Isn't that interesting? A person's destiny is set in motion through the silent switch of thought, thought energy. Every invention, every worthwhile discovery was first a mental concept. Every idea that has been backed with faith and effort has become a visible reality. And all seeming material obstructions, such as poverty or physical weaknesses, have only served to stimulate creative action by giving birth to inward resources and bringing out inherent abilities. I remember Rick Hansen, the story of Rick Hansen, and Bob Proctor actually met him and spent some time with him. So I'm going to read this section. Bob Proctor says, about a year ago, I spent some time with Rick Hansen. Rick is a young man who was left paralyzed from the waist down after an automobile accident. He told me that his physical disability turned into a good thing. Because his disability was physical, he could see it and overcome it. Although he was virtually unknown and without money, he pushed himself around the world in his wheelchair and raised millions of dollars for spinal cord research. It was Rick Hansen's thoughts that liberated him from a dull, pitiful life. His thoughts gave him a life full of adventure, a life full of service to thousands, a life that caused millions of people to look at themselves and think of what they were doing with their lives. Before I started doing this work, I was a catastrophic injury specialist for the government insurance company in my province. And all of the people who I dealt with had either sustained spinal cord injuries like Rick Hansen, where they were confined to a wheelchair, or worse, that their spinal cord injury was at a higher level, so they couldn't even feed themselves. I also dealt with people who had sustained severe brain injuries, and life as they knew it was never the same. And some of those people sank into deep depression, grieving the life that they had lost. And some of them looked at what they had and turned their life around, like Rick Hansen. They served from a different place, from their heart, instead of physical labor or doing a job that they had just fallen into because of circumstances. They couldn't earn an income the same way they did. They had to think, what could I do? And remarkably, people who have their legs taken away from them or their any physical ability to do anything, but they still were able to think. They could write books. They could change their communities by a change in how they thought. They offered different opinions because they could think differently. They could think about, what can I do? What could make this easier? If this made my life easier, how could I help other people in this situation? And yet, able-bodied people who could walk and talk and run and play and work and write and do things, oh, woe is me, my life sucks. What can you do? What would life look like with the talents, the gifts, the abilities that you have been gifted by the omnipotent God, omnipresent, source energy, always flowing to and through you? What can you do? What would it be like if the beautiful picture that you hold in your mind was real, was true? And it's only there in your mind because it's meant for you. You are meant to bring it into physical reality. The picture in your mind is what's developing in your life. Make it beautiful. Life always expresses the result of our dominant thinking. our dominant thoughts. Your dominant thoughts, the thoughts that you think over and over and over, habitually, automatically, without you even noticing, those aren't real thinking thoughts, but those have been implanted in you, embedded in your subconscious mind. And if that's what's replaying over and over and over, you continue to get the same results. So you want to just step back and think, what am I thinking? What thoughts are running my life? Is what I'm about to do taking me closer to the life that I desire, or keeping me deeper entrenched in what I've been focused on? If your thinking patterns have been focused in the direction of lack, limitation, poverty, scarcity, or something that is happening that you don't want, let it go. Flip the switch and start looking at, what do I really want? If you really take the time to visualize it, to see it in your mind, and to write about it, ideas start to flow. They start to come out of the blue. They start to come from nothing, from your imagination. Thought is a tremendous power, and you can use it to improve the quality of your life and the lives of others. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, which it is now, it will make progress in 1 decade. It will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. At the time that Bob Proctor wrote this book, we didn't have ChatGPT or Gemini or any kind of artificial intelligence. Look what has happened in the last 20 years. Look at what's happened in the last year. What you think about, you bring about. That's how everything in the world has been changed. Thinking is the highest function you are capable of. And this mental faculty should be exercised at every possible opportunity. Don't think about what you don't want. Don't allow your thoughts to run away like a train running down a track, picking up momentum in the wrong direction. Thought is the preamble to everything in your life. Use your thought energy in the direction of what you truly desire. Think about what you're thinking about. Think about what you really want. Create a wonderful day. And I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 7. Thank you.